You know, when we think about the American home front during World War II, we usually picture this perfect image of unity, right? Everybody pulling together. But the year 1943, well, it tells a much more complicated story. It was a year of incredible patriotism, for sure, but it was also a year of shocking violence, and it revealed both the very best and the absolute worst of the nation, all at the same time.
And that's really the heart of what we're going to unpack here, the great contradiction of 1943. On one hand, you've got a nation mobilized like never before in its history. And on the other, you've got a society that's cracking under the strain, with these deep, ugly tensions just boiling over onto the streets. So how can both of these things be true at once? Well, let's dig in.
Okay, so first up, let's talk about that unity. By 1943, pretty much every single aspect of American life was being reshaped to serve the war effort. The entire country was on a war footing, and this meant the government had to step in a way that was completely unprecedented.
And this right here, this is a perfect example of that massive government intervention. To stop inflation from just spiraling out of control while factories were pumping out war materials, President Roosevelt issued an executive order that froze wages and prices. I mean, can you even imagine that happening today? This was total economic mobilization, and it hit every single worker and every single consumer in the country.
But, you know, it wasn't all just about government mandates and factory production lines. That national spirit, that unity, was also built in the moments of joy and distraction. Americans found all kinds of ways to come together, to blow off some steam, and really reinforce that feeling of a shared national identity through culture and entertainment.
And America was definitely on the move. Dance halls were absolutely packed with people doing the Jitterbug, this super energetic, almost defiant dance that just perfectly captured the high-strung energy of the time. Meanwhile, Hollywood's biggest stars weren't just making movies. They were out there, crisscrossing the country on massive war bond drives, using their celebrity to raise billions for the war effort. It was patriotism you could literally dance to.
And hey, even the world of sports couldn't escape the realities of the war. With so many young men serving overseas, professional leagues had to get really creative just to keep the games going. And that led to some truly unique moments in sports history.
And this story is just a perfect example of that. In the NFL, you had two bitter rivals from Pennsylvania, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Philadelphia Eagles. Both teams were so depleted of players they couldn't even field a team. So what'd they do? They merged for the 1943 season. They got nicknamed the Steagles, which is just a perfect symbol of rivals putting aside their differences for the greater good.
Baseball saw the same kind of thing, a mix of adapting to the new reality while holding on to tradition. With tons of male players gone, the All-American Girls Professional Baseball League was founded. This gave women a chance to play pro ball and kept America's ballparks full. And at the exact same time, the national pastime just kept on going, which gave everyone a powerful sense of normalcy.
And you better believe, in the fall of 1943, the country tuned in as the New York Yankees beat the St. Louis Cardinals 4-1 in the World Series. It was a familiar, comforting ritual in a world that felt anything but.
I mean, the war effort got into every single corner of American culture. So much so, you could really say that even Donald Duck went to war. Entertainment wasn't just an escape anymore. It was a tool for propaganda, for boosting morale, and, for demonizing the enemy.
And if you need proof, look no further than this. The Disney animated short Der Führer's Face, which just mercilessly mocks Hitler and Nazism, wasn't just some popular cartoon. It won an Academy Award in 1943. This wasn't some fringe thing. This was mainstream, award-winning entertainment. The entire cultural machine was part of the war.
But, and this is a huge but, beneath this roaring engine of patriotism and unity, a very different story was unfolding. Because while a lot of Americans were dancing the Jitterbug and buying war bonds, not everyone was celebrating.
All of those immense pressures of the war, the mass migrations of people, the rationing, the social upheaval, they didn't just bring people together. They also acted like a giant pressure cooker, exposing these deep, ugly cracks of prejudice and inequality that were already there in America's foundation.
Think about it. Millions of Americans, both black and white, were on the move, pouring into industrial cities for jobs in defense plants. Places like Detroit and Los Angeles became overcrowded like almost overnight. Resources were tight, and suddenly the competition for jobs, for housing, even for just a seat on the bus, became incredibly intense. This massive shift created a tinderbox of social friction, and in the summer of 1943, that tinderbox ignited.
In Los Angeles, this friction exploded into what we now call the Zoot Suit Riots. The conflict really centered on young Mexican and Filipino-American men who wore these really flamboyant outfits called zoot suits. For them, it was a fashion statement, a piece of their identity. But for a lot of the white servicemen stationed nearby, it was seen as unpatriotic, even defiant, and it led to days of brutal violence in the streets.
And LA wasn't the only city on fire that summer, not by a long shot. That same summer, Detroit just erupted, and you can see the contrast right here. In Detroit, the conflict was raw racial tension between black and white residents, boiling over from fights for housing and jobs. In LA, it was framed more as a clash of culture and patriotism. But look closer. What was the root cause of both? Deep-seated prejudice, brought bubbling to the surface by the pressures of war.
So, this brings us right back to where we started, doesn't it? How on earth do we make sense of a year like 1943? Well, it means we have to hold two very different, conflicting truths in our minds at the exact same time.
And here's the crucial takeaway. 1943 showed us the absolute best of America, a nation capable of this incredible unity and shared sacrifice. But it also showed us the absolute worst of America, a nation still plagued by violent prejudice and division. To really understand the home front, you have to understand that the Steagles and the Detroit race riots happened in the same country, in the same year. One story doesn't cancel out the other. They're woven together. That is the American experience of the war.
And that really leaves us with a final, pretty big question. Does a crisis like World War II forge a nation's character, or does it just reveal what was already there all along, both the good and the bad? The story of 1943 seems to suggest it does both.